Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball. Cade dribbles through traffic, gets to the basket, and throws it down.
Out of bounds, Detroit basketball!
Wow, it feels weird to be back on the airwaves, but welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by the Believe Network and FanDuel Sportsbook. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, if you can remember me, or my co-host, Jasper Apollonia, but you go away for 2 weeks in the podcasting world, and it's like you fall off the face of the earth, unlike the team that we're going to talk about today, the Detroit Pistons. But Jasper, it's our first podcast of 2026. Had a couple weeks off there for Christmas and the New Year. It feels great to be back, and we've got a lot to talk about with the Detroit Pistons, the first seed in the Eastern Conference still.
I can't blame our viewers if they don't recognize us. We both got fresh cuts in the 2 weeks we're gone, so it's going to be... I'm just imagining our viewers, like, you ever see those videos of, like, when a baby... their dad like shaves for the first time and they just start crying? That's just what I'm going to anticipate most of our audience is going to do today. They're going to, when they see this, they're going to break down in tears, sobbing. They don't even know why. They're frightened. But yeah, man, it's great to be back. I'm fighting through illness and just getting off of the plane, coming back from Detroit. My right ear still hasn't popped. But this is just what we do for you guys. We had to settle aside a little time for the holidays, but man, Aaron, we got so much to talk about. The Pistons, man, they are just, gosh, what can you say about this team? Well, I guess you guys are about to find out. So let's get into it, dude.
Let's get into it, and let's start off with what I quietly think is a really interesting topic. If we go over and look at the odds by our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook, you'll see that Cade Cunningham is now has the third best odds for the league's MVP regular season award. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is what I would say heavy favorite at minus 450 at the time of recording here on Thursday evening. Luka Doncic has the second best odds at plus 750. But Cade Cunningham is sitting there at plus 1,800 with the third best odds. And I just think that after the Nikola Jokic injury, which we have not had a podcast since that happened, it essentially has taken him out of the MVP race. And he was the heavy favorite to win that award. But it essentially takes him out of the race. We know that Luka Doncic misses time every year. It would not be surprising if he doesn't meet the maximum number of games played or the minimum number of games played to be eligible for this award come the end of the season. And so I look at where Cade is at. I look at where the Pistons are at on the season, number one seed in the Eastern Conference, the second most wins in the NBA. Obviously, Cade Cunningham is having a spectacular season. It feels like last year was his leap to stardom, and right now we're watching him take that leap into superstardom. And so I look at this award and I look at the leaderboard, and I will say I think that there's a pathway to Cade Cunningham winning MVP.
Yeah, no question. I mean, he's third already. It's there. I think for me, look, if I was going to go throw money on anybody other than SGA, I'd rather put it on Cade than Luka. Because, look, this is an individual award, yes, but we've seen historically it's not just an individual award. It is also a team award to an extent. Nobody on the number 6 seed is winning MVP. Sorry, it doesn't matter how good your season was. You're not winning MVP. And even if you're, say, somebody that is perhaps not as good of an individual player as somebody else, but your team is better, you also can win MVP. Think Derrick Rose in 2010. Dwight Howard, LeBron James, in my book, were better that year. But Derrick Rose's team won 64 games, and he had the emotional component behind him. I think that's the number one thing when you're looking at Cade. What his team is doing right now is special. What this team is doing is absolutely special. It's a 2-year turnaround, the likes of which this league just does not see period. And in order for him to win this award, I do still think with how good SGA has been, they are the defending champions. Nikola Jokic is out. I do think it will be tough for him to win it. But absolutely, if SGA does not play enough games to be eligible, or if the Oklahoma City Thunder continue to, I don't want to say slide because they still have the best record in the NBA, but if they continue to look fallible, mortal, and the Pistons continue to improve, let's say they pick somebody up at the trade deadline and it puts Cade's numbers even higher, I think it's a very, very reasonable bet to make on Cade Cunningham right now, and a far smarter one than Luka Doncic.
I love that you brought up how when you look at these awards, the team record matters, the team's level of play matters, because this was something that we talked about. A few years ago when it was the 2023-2024 season, and Cade Cunningham was playing at an all-star level, but he ultimately didn't get the all-star nod. Well, it was because of where the Pistons were at as a team. He didn't get that nod to all-stardom because his team was really, really, really bad. And so now it's kind of on the flip side of, hey, the Pistons are really, really, really good. And now you can't ignore what the head of the snake is doing in Cade Cunningham. I mean, 27 points a game, 10 assists, 6 rebounds. The three-point shooting that started off very, very slowly is inching its way back up to where Cade has been at throughout his career. I mean, and again, he's the best player on the best team in the Eastern Conference. I think that means a whole lot. So definitely something that I think you have to keep an eye on now that Nikola Jokic is essentially out of the race. I think I saw something where he would have to return. I forget the exact number, but for what his injury is and what the timeline for recovery is, it'd be very difficult for him to come back and play the minimum number of games needed to win that award. So definitely something to keep an eye on, I think.
Absolutely. No question about it. I think it also, begs the question of why we have these arbitrary numbers in terms of games played and minutes played in order for guys to win these awards. We saw it last year with Isaiah Stewart not matching the minimum minutes requirement for the season, which is why he didn't make a all defensive team. He might not have, but this year it's a similar situation. If there's because he has to play not just 20 minutes a game, but a certain amount of games playing over 20 minutes. If there's, in a couple games he misses because of injury, and then there's a game or two that he gets taken out of early, let's say he fouls out in the first half, God forbid he gets into some sort of altercation, an argument with another player and gets ejected. I can't see that happening, obviously, but yeah, I think it also begs that question as well, where Nikola Jokic is not only not going to win MVP, he's not even going to be able to be eligible to get votes for MVP. That to me doesn't really work with my brain. But regardless, we're not here to talk about Nikola Jokic. We're here to talk about the Pistons, man. And wow, they have given us a lot to talk about in the last 2 weeks, have they not?
They have, and it was that Western Conference road trip really that started for Detroit, and it started off strong with 2 wins on the road in Portland and at Sacramento, and then the wheels started to come off a little bit for Detroit. They came out after Christmas and dropped 2 disappointing losses to Utah, and then got absolutely embarrassed by the Clippers. And they ended up beating the Lakers shortly after that to wrap up the road trip, get home. You could tell that there were tired legs. There was fatigue. Like, they wanted to come home. Granted, they also, were in LA for an extended period of time. There are certainly worse places that you could be at, especially during the very cold winter season in Detroit, Michigan. But then they come out and you look at what they did, and they lose to Miami to start off the year, and they had lost 3 of their last 4 games. And it was like, okay, what's happening here? Is this a sign of this team's kind of cooling off a little bit? They're regressing back to the mean. Should there be concern? Does this fuel the speculation of, hey, the Pistons need to make a major move? And then all of a sudden, Detroit rattles off 3 in a row. They beat Cleveland on the road in a game where they had really essentially dominated, but then kind of faltered late in the game and allowed Cleveland to make it much closer than it really felt like it was. The big game, though, was on Monday against the New York Knicks at home, and the Pistons blew them out of the water by 31 points. It felt like they had gotten to do something that they had been holding in since falling to the Knicks in the playoffs last season and absolutely annihilated them. It was a nationally televised game. Cade Cunningham had an MVP level performance with 29 points and 13 assists, clearly dominated the Knicks. And then they go out and against the Chicago Bulls win 108-93 without Cade Cunningham, but also without Jalen Duren and Tobias Harris, who have missed a handful of games for Detroit here and are probably going to continue to miss some games heading into their next 3 or 4 games, depending on Jalen Duren, who was, I think, being reevaluated after 1 week, and then Tobias Harris after 2 weeks. So Duren might be back sooner rather than later, and obviously we'll see if Cade Cunningham is good to go. He just missed the Chicago game, and it felt like maybe the Pistons were being a little cautious with him. But that being said, the Pistons have won 3 in a row after dropping 3 of their last 4, and that win against New York is, I think, the vocal point of the season right now. They really showed what this team can be like.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people freaked out when they lost 3 of 4. I did less so, because when you look at what happened in those games, you look at the Utah game, Utah just shot absolutely lights out from 3 in that contest. The Pistons made a couple of really poor plays down the stretch that cost them what was definitely a winnable game, and people freaked out about that. And then the Utah Jazz, literally the very next night, go into San Antonio and beat the brakes off of the Spurs. They beat them by 20. So to me, that took a little bit of the sting off. Then the next game you go in, you lose your second game in a row for the second time this season against the Clippers. That was one of the few contests this season where the Pistons really looked outmatched. It was that one, and I think of the Cleveland game, fourth game in the season. Those were the 2 games where they've really looked outclassed. But look, Kawhi Leonard had a career high 55 points. You got an all-time game by an all-time player. I can understand if then you go home, you lose by 6 to Miami in somewhat of a similar way to the Utah game. It's another very winnable one. You competed, but you didn't make the plays you needed to down the stretch. I think having that LA game against the Lakers really helped you put it more into context, though. Because, look, they sent a message against LA, and we'll talk about the message they sent against New York, but they also sent a message to LA and said, look, if we lose like this, you better bring your A game if you're the next team facing us, because we're going to run you off the court. And they did. And Cade Cunningham outplayed Luka Doncic. The Lakers looked old. They looked uninvested. They looked not like a team that belonged on the same court as your Detroit Pistons did. And then, for me to see the Pistons come out after a disappointing loss against Miami, beat Cleveland, like you said, maybe it should have been a little easier than it was. And then, yes, truly, this is the statement game of the season for Detroit. 3 letters, BTA, belt to ass. And you saw everybody, and I'm not just talking about Pistons fans, I'm not just talking about the Detroit market, I'm not even just talking about the national market, I'm talking about Knicks fans. Went on their podcasts, went on their streams, and said, this can't happen again. You owned the New York Knicks. And the Pistons really went out there, and it was very clear. And you had some people in the local market who wanted to take away from the win by saying, well, it's clear that the game meant more to the Pistons than it did to the Knicks. Yes, exactly. That's the point. And the Pistons proved that if the Knicks don't come out with that exact energy and they meet them in the playoffs, they're going to get swept. And they're not just going to get swept, they're going to get dominated for the entire series. This was a message, plain and simple. It doesn't matter that it meant more to Detroit. It should have meant more to Detroit than it meant to New York. And they responded in kind. They said, if you don't match us, we're going to kill you. We're no longer going into the playoffs and saying, hey, maybe we can win this series. We're going out there and we're saying, we should have beaten you last year, and we are better than you this year. And that is the type of message that a team like New York, look, either they have to internalize it and grow from it, or they're going to fold. They came out, they had a better game the next game, but I think especially without Jalen Duren on the floor, man, that was really big. And also, and I know he's been a little bit of a guy that has been I don't want to say a negative for this team in the eyes of fans, but a replaceable part in Tobias Harris. Do not forget the job that he did on Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs last year. Yeah. He was huge. And the Pistons were able to not just match that kind of defense on Karl Anthony Towns. They exceeded it. 6 points, 6 rebounds. Invisible. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. And I think this was another part of it too. It was a message by the team. It was also a message by Cade to say, I'm the best player on this court. There's not Karl Anthony Towns is not on the same level as me. Jalen Brunson is not on the same level as me. And all these dudes that you've brought in to be your defenders on the wings, they cannot do anything to stop me. I mean, what he was doing to Mikal Bridges should qualify as like child abuse in several states. He sunned him. He took him in the paint and he said, if you let me get this ball with my back to the basket and we're at the free throw line, I'm going to take 2 dribbles, I'm going to walk you down, and I'm just going to dunk you into the hoop. And then they put OG Anunoby on him. And what happened? The exact same thing. OG couldn't handle him. Could not handle him. And I'm sorry, folks, I don't think Josh Hart is going to make a 31-point difference in that game. So that was huge. And then you go out against Chicago after this big win, and you do the exact same thing without Cade, without Duren, without Jalen Duren, without Tobias Harris. And you go in there, and yes, Chicago matched your physicality for 3 quarters. And then the Pistons did the exact same thing in the fourth. They said, here's our foot, here's your neck, we're stepping on it, and we're not letting up. And the Bulls, just like the Knicks, just like the Lakers, just like the Cavs, did not have the counter punch. So now you're looking at this team in Detroit, and I want to get to you, Aaron, but you're looking at a team where even if you look at the 3 losses in 4 games, even if you look at perhaps not games that you wanted to see play out in the way that they did in regards to Portland and Sacramento, because let's not forget the Pistons did not play their best in those games. Those were games they could have lost as well. Mm-hmm. And you look at that and you take a breath and you look over the last 15 games in the NBA, the Detroit Pistons have the second best offense and the 4th best defensive rating and the 2nd best net rating of any team in the NBA, only behind the Boston Celtics. So, Aaron, even for the ups and the downs, I think what's really clear about this team is when they face adversity, they're going to match it. And even if one game isn't what you want to see, their overall body of work is going to be one of dominance in this Eastern Conference.
Every night is a testament to the depth that this team has and the compete factor that 1 through 15 is bought into. I mean, whether it's the Knicks game without Tobias Harris and Jalen Duren, they were playing without Karis LeVert for a few games there as well. Then they don't have Cade Cunningham against the Bulls. And so you get more Dennis Jenkins, who had kind of gone from in the rotation to out of the rotation and then was all of a sudden back into the rotation. You get Marcus Sasser having these huge games, against Cleveland, against who was the other team, but having these big performances against the Lakers. Like
he also balled out against the Heat. I mean, he was a huge reason they could have won that game.
You have these guys, I mean, and hand up, I remember sitting on this podcast after the Pistons had signed Javonte Green saying, hey, that's great, but this is like your 13th, 14th guy. Like, they need to do something else here. Javonte Green has been absolutely spectacular this year. I mean, he has been the just most seamless fit. You know you could put him on the court and the result is going to be positive. The depth that this team has, but also the buy-in that this team has is truly remarkable. And in my years of watching basketball, I don't know if I've seen anything quite like it. You have these guys that just on paper are not supposed to be as impactful as they end up being in these games. I mean, how big of a luxury is it that Paul Reed is your third string center? This guy can go from not playing in a game to starting the next game and having 15 and 10 and 2 steals and 2 blocks. Like, it's just remarkable that on any given night, JB Bickerstaff can turn to any given player on his team, whether it be a standard contract or a two-way contract, and say, I need minutes from you. And the large majority of the time, that guy's going to give good minutes. It's impressive. You know, I was a little bit concerned when they, in that stretch where they had lost 3 of their last 4. You know, it looked like I could understand coming off the holiday. You're in LA, you're tired, you want to go home, you've been on the road for over a week, like you're just ready to be home. And then they got home and they dropped that game to Miami, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? And then they just completely flipped it around, even with losing some guys. And that's the nice thing where it's like, hey, Cade Cunningham, you know, we think we can beat Chicago. Chicago's going to have some of their own top guys out. Maybe this is a good game to give Cade that opportunity to rest his wrist, rest his body. And I know that I can play Danis Jenkins, that I can play Marcus Sasser, that I can start Jaden Ivey, and I'm going to be able to stay afloat in this game because I know that my 10, my 11, my 12th man, they're all going to come in and they're going to, maybe if they don't have the best shooting game of the night of their season, they're still going to give me that same effort, that same compete level. And it sounds cliche and it sounds like coach speak, but I mean, it's not. It is the reality with this team. It is what makes them so unique. I mean, I think back to the Lakers game, and I can remember the point where the Lakers quit in the second half, where the Lakers said, we cannot stay with this team. We don't bad enough. We can't get it as good as they can. And they fell apart. And the Pistons, it's like the Pistons turned it up even more. Like they knew they had them. And so they stepped on the gas a little bit harder and went a little bit faster. And it took them out of the game. What they did against the Knicks was spectacular, right? You go to the Bulls game, and as you said, through basically three full quarters, the Bulls were right there with them. The Bulls were leading. And then the Pistons were like, okay, these final 12 minutes, they're ours. They outscore them 30-something to 16.
32 to 16 in the fourth quarter.
And like,
dominance.
You know, and the Bulls game, no Cade Cunningham, no Jalen Hurts, no Tony Barrett. You know who comes in and you know who comes off the bench randomly in the fourth quarter and contributes? It's rookie guard Chaz Lanier, who's barely played for them for a while. He had a little bit of a stretch earlier in the season where he was playing some minutes, but for a large part, recently had been out of the rotation. Comes in, knocks down a couple threes, ends up with 8 points, gives them a nice little boost that they needed. They can call on anyone at any given moment and know they're going to get contributions out of them. This is why they're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. This is why even though, you know, the betting markets are going to say, you know, back the Knicks to come out of the East, back the Cavs to come out of these. Don't back the Pistons. This is why no matter what those markets say, I don't really see how you as an actual person and not an AI system can overlook the Pistons, can overlook the energy, the physicality that they play with for 48 minutes every night.
We've talked about it for years now, Aaron. Culture matters. Team identity matters. Leadership matters. And when you look at the Detroit Pistons, I think they have those things certainly more than any other team in the East, other than maybe Boston. I think Boston is the only other team right now that I look in the East and I say they have an argument to be saying, hey, you know, we fight in the same way that the Detroit Pistons do, especially when you look at their, you know, front court rotation. What they've done there is spectacular. But yes, you're 100% right, Aaron. This team makes other teams quit. And not just like makes them quit because they beat them so bad. No, they make them quit in competitive games. They go, you know what? I've had's all I can stands, and I can't stands no more. You know, that's really where it goes. And you saw the Lakers give up. I've never seen anything like that from a LeBron-led team. That was insane. I mean, I've never seen a team quit like that. With those kind of players in that kind of game. And the same thing goes for Chicago. I mean, they quit in the fourth quarter. They didn't have the juice. They outworked them. And I'm so glad that you brought up some of those lesser heralded guys. And obviously they're big, topics on Pistons Twitter. And I was a big, that's overstating the fact. I liked the Javonte Green signing as a depth signing. I thought he could fit. Now he's like entered the Antonio McDyess, Anthony Tolliver, Will Bynum echelon of like guys where I'm like, I wish you were always a Piston, and I wish you will always be a Piston. Please never leave my team, because what he brings to this squad is obviously what Cade brings is pretty much irreplaceable. But damn, if what Javonte Green brings doesn't feel irreplaceable to an extent as well. How many massive, game-changing, momentum-shifting steals and dunks. I mean, like, the cuts that he makes on the baseline, and he just yams it down, and it's like, we're back. We got this. The Pistons start to struggle for a little bit in the third quarter. Javonte Green comes in, mucks everything up for the opposition. We're in the lead again, and they never look back. And that's the kind of thing that he brings to this team. Dennis Jenkins, man. Holy hell. We've talked about how much we love Dennis Jenkins on this podcast. I mean, Aaron, he didn't play against Miami. Didn't play. Coach's decision, DNP, comes out 3 days later against Miami, 7 of 10 from the floor, 6 of 7 from 3, 25 points, 5 assists. 2 nights ago, last night against Chicago, his shot's not falling. 1 of 8 from the floor. What does he do? 15 assists to 1 turnover. 15-1. I mean, the way that these guys are able to come off the bench with no playing time, with no guarantee, it's the thing that NBA vets and role players will tell you is the hardest thing about not being a starter, or even not even being like one of the first 2-3 guys off the bench, because you don't know if you're going to get in that game. And all that the coach is going to tell you is stay ready, stay ready, stay ready. Staying ready when you know you're not going to play is the hardest. I cannot imagine how hard that must be, to go into work and not know if you're even going to get a chance to prove what you can do when millions of dollars and your dreams are on the line. I can't imagine how hard that is. But every single one of the Pistons role players, whether it's Marcus Sasser, Chaz Lanier, Dennis Jenkins, I almost said Javonte Green, but let's be honest, Javonte is a critical part of the rotation at this point. It doesn't matter what these guys did in the game before, or what they didn't do in the game before, or what they didn't do in the week leading up to this. If they're called on, they're going to be ready, and they perform. All of these guys do. I really like, I'm glad you brought up like the nobody believes in us, the cast-offs kind of thing. The last team that I really, really remember feeling this way about was the 2004 Detroit Pistons. It really was. And I think you're seeing something come together that's very similar to that, where, let's not forget, everybody picked the Lakers in 4. Nobody thought the Pistons were going to win that series. Nobody believed in that Pistons team all season long, even though they went to the Eastern Conference Finals the year before. Nobody believed in them. They won, 23-5 after trading Rasheed Wallace. Nobody thought they were winning the title. Didn't matter. Didn't matter. Because when you watched them play, and if you were being really objective and not just looking at who plays for what team, what organization, who's got the star power, it was obvious that was a championship level team. And I feel that way about this team too. Do they need to make a trade? Maybe. Do I think they can make the finals if they don't make a trade? Yes.
I think that's interesting, because I think this is obviously a very good team. but my biggest concern is in the playoffs, do they have the offensive firepower, the half-court offense capable of winning playoff series where possessions get tighter, energy goes up, teams protect the ball at a higher rate where the Pistons can't get out, they can't force as many turnovers, they can't score as much in transition, where three-point shooting is going to become more important. I think those are all questions that people might have right now. And then it's funny because then you'll look at the offensive rating, and as you said earlier, like in their last 15 games, they have the second best offensive rating in the league. But that being said, even though the Pistons have the top record in the Eastern Conference, they're the number 1 seed, they're having this phenomenal season, they are one of, if not the most talked about teams when it comes to making a trade, when it comes to making a bit of a significant trade. Some of the names that we've heard throughout the season: Anthony Davis, Trey Murphy, Michael Porter Jr. It feels like all of those guys are still on the table. It does feel like in the Anthony Davis case, the Pistons aren't really in the Anthony Davis business. Reports indicate that's more of Atlanta, that's more of Toronto, which in my mind, I'm perfectly okay with. We talked about Anthony Davis a while back. Not necessarily the guy I think Detroit needs to be going after. We talked about Michael Porter Jr. Maybe the last podcast we had a couple weeks ago. He is a name that you were a fan of. He's grown on me. I think if you look at his offensive output in Brooklyn, he's putting up numbers on a bad team, but he's also doing it hyper efficiently. It's not just shot chucking. It's not just him getting his, like he's doing it in a way. And he's also a former NBA champion. So he obviously can play on a winning basketball team. So I think that is still a name that is popular, and the Pistons have been linked to in some essence. And then the one for me that's always been like the pipe dream is getting a guy that slides into your long-term core, and that's Trey Murphy. I would be a huge, huge proponent of the Pistons going after him, but you're talking about that being a massive move. The price to acquire someone like that, he just had 42 points the other night for New Orleans. Like, that is a guy that costs you a lot more than perhaps a smaller move, a consolidation move where the Pistons take one or two guys and maybe one pick or a couple second-round picks and turn it into one player at a different position. Maybe they take a couple of their guards and go get one forward, and they make a move like that. A Trey Murphy move is not that. I don't know if a Michael Porter Jr. move is that either. Maybe it is because of the contract that the Pistons could get away with involving one pick or a number of second-round picks and one or two players to make it work. But Jasper, is a trade necessary for this team? And of the guys that the Pistons have been linked to or been speculated to be linked to, who stands out to you as I think this guy would positively impact this team?
Well, I already gave you my answer, which is no, I don't think they need to make a trade. I think they just proved that they don't need to make a trade. I mean, their games against Cleveland and against New York and against Los Angeles as well, I think they proved, no, they don't need to make a trade. They can beat these teams. Doesn't matter. They can beat them. And that's even if they're banged up and missing their second best player this year. So, no, I don't think they need to make a trade. I would still like them to make a trade, and I think it's more along the lines of something that you just laid out there, which is maybe you package a couple guards for someone that's a little bit more attractive as, not like a, hey, we need shooting, let's play Marcus Sasser tonight. A guy that you can just say, hey, we're going to play this guy every night. He's part of our rotation. I saw something thrown out there. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was, I don't even want to say it was the Bill Simmons podcast. It might have been. I saw somebody throw out a trade package that would acquire Dante DiVincenzo and Michael Porter Jr. for the Pistons, and it would take 2 first-round picks, Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris. I would 100% do that. No question. But I think if maybe you're not making a trade of that size, which to me is still not an all-in trade, that's still that's a medium-sized trade. It's something, but when you look at what assets you're giving up for what you're bringing in, it's really not that huge of a trade. Tobias Harris expiring, Jaden Ivey expiring, and who really knows? I mean, the Pistons being as good as they are might take him out of contention to come back to this team next year, because they are at the point, and you saw it against Chicago, where, they can't really afford to let him work his way back into it with all the time that he might need to. They're going to need him to either be a playoff ready performer by the time the trade deadline goes around, or I'm sorry, I think you have to assume he's gone, or he's coming back on a very, very much smaller deal than he would want to come back on. And when you have somebody like Dennis Jenkins who can come in and get you 15 assists when Jaden Ivey was the guy who was the starter, it's kind of doesn't look great for me. But I think if you could trade something like Sasser and LeVert for like a Dante DiVincenzo, that'd be incredible. I'd do that in a heartbeat. Do I think that the Timberwolves would necessarily be down for that? I don't know. I think that's one of those trades where maybe you're getting into like a 3-team deal, because then you can have another team send out first-round picks and acquire salary, blah, blah, blah. But that to me is the most attractive trade offer I have seen. So for me, I would like a Karis LeVert upgrade. I would like, yes, if you can get it for the right price, a Tobias Harris upgrade. But other than that, no, I don't think they need to make a trade. And I think they, more so than that, I would say I actively do not want them to take a big risk on a trade. There's a difference between making a trade and taking a big risk. To me, a Michael Porter Jr. trade is not a big risk. A Trey Murphy deal is not a big risk. Zion, that's a risk. Yeah. I don't want them to take that kind of deal. LeBron, that's a risk at this point. I don't want them taking that kind of thing. It needs to be something that just clearly makes sense when you put it on paper. You know what I mean? And I feel like the advantage of us evaluating the Pistons' weaknesses this year is that they are so consistent. We know exactly where they can upgrade and what they need to do that. So, no, I don't want them. Don't go chasing waterfalls. But at the same time, there's going to be moves there. And if there's like a Dennis Schroeder type thing again, take that tomorrow. Yeah. Take it right now.
Yeah, I'm curious, even if you're not in favor of the Pistons making a move, I think one thing that's interesting to talk about is what are the pieces that the Pistons should be willing to include in trade talks? Obviously, Cade Cunningham is off the table, and obviously it would take monumental assets to acquire a guy like a Jalen Duren. But we know Tobias Harris in his contract makes sense in a big move for Detroit. He is $26 million that you can use to acquire a big name, and you need it for salary matching type purposes in any of those big type deals. I think Karis LeVert is another salary, $14 million. The Pistons have shown that they have a lot of guards that can give them good minutes off the bench. Dennis Jenkins, Marcus Sasser, and then another guy in Jaden Ivey, who I think is also kind of in that same boat of he's due for an extension. He's going to hit restricted free agency. Do the Pistons want to be in the Jaden Ivey business, or are they maybe not loving what they're seeing? Maybe there's not as much of a need to make it work with him here, because you're seeing guys like Jenkins and Sasser give good minutes when called upon. And so maybe he can be used in that quote unquote consolidation type trade. And so, you have Tobias Harris, you have Karis LeVert, you have Jaden Ivey. I think Marcus Sasser, if a team's buying what they're seeing in him right now and he's getting minutes and they like what they're seeing, maybe he's upped his trade value a little bit. But outside of that, the tough thing with the Pistons making a trade is I just think they're limited in guys that they're going to be looking or really be willing to move. Yes, they would move Ron Holland, but they're not going to be actively trying to include him in any deals. And they don't want to trade Isaiah Stewart. Isaiah Stewart may not be an all-star player, but for the Detroit Pistons, he is essentially that in what he brings to them on a nightly basis. So it's you'd love to be able to improve the roster, but I think the Pistons are kind of going to be working with a very small group of players that they'd be willing to move in a deal. I mean, I think Tobias Harris belongs in that same conversation. I think they love what he brings to the locker room. His numbers have dipped. They've not dipped crazily, but it just doesn't feel like he's maybe having the same impact this year that he had last year. And maybe that's a good thing because other guys have stepped up and taken on more responsibility where you're not relying on Tobias Harris to have these big games or keep you afloat in some of these big matchups. So I think they have a real value and a real liking to him and appreciate that, hey, he wanted to come here. He wanted to play for the Pistons and was a big part of their turnaround last year. I almost feel like, yes, they move him, but they don't really want to. So I think that's a challenge in making an in-season move and why it feels like, hey, maybe they do go the route of packaging LeVert and or Ivy with maybe another small contract and a pick to get something at the forward spot or something like that. But I just don't know if you see a big move midseason. I think they want to see how this plays out and go from there in the offseason.
You know who's somebody that has not been talked about, and I understand why not, because he's so crucial to what the Pistons do right now, but his contract is non-guaranteed for next season.
Yep.
Duncan Robinson.
Yep.
And I have to be honest with you, that's probably their most attractive trade asset is Duncan Robinson right now. And I do really wonder, I mean, well, no, I guess if a team is taking him on in order to non-guarantee the contract, actually Tobias Harris is in that case a more attractive asset because there's more money coming off the books. So I take that back. I apologize. I'm sorry. But I think Duncan Robinson is also a very attractive trade asset. And one that I'm wondering for you, Aaron, you know, they have shown in the last few weeks, they have a lot of playable guards on this team. They have a lot of dudes who can, and let's be real, guys who are also shooting pretty well from three. Dennis Jenkins is over 40% from three on the season still. Jaden Ivey is shooting he's over 40% from three as well. Marcus Sasser is got 50, 60, 1,000 shooting splits right now. I mean, small sample size, but still, he's a guy who's willing to shoot. Are you willing to give up Duncan Robinson in a trade if it means you were to acquire somebody at the power forward spot who is a prolific shooter on that level? Do you feel good enough about your guard depth in regards to shooting in order to do that, where you don't feel like it's a move that doesn't make a difference for you? You know what I mean? Or do you think that that's something that would be worth it for you? Because I do think that is a very attractive asset in Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, I think Duncan Robinson has been played very, very well for the Pistons this year. I think he's outperformed at least what my expectations were for him. But to sit here and say that the Pistons couldn't move him would be ridiculous. It's a ridiculous notion. Like, if there's value to a team in getting his contract that they can then, let go of and open up cap space for, next year when they want to make different moves, like, yeah, the Pistons have to be willing and can be willing to consider moving him in any deal because of Chaz Lanier, because of Marcus Sasser, because of Dennis Jenkins. Like, the guard play, and for what Duncan Robinson brings, like, it's shooting, it's cutting, it's not really much, playmaking or defense or anything like that. Like, the Pistons could afford, if they're going to upgrade and they're going to get a Michael Porter Jr., or heck, maybe they, I don't know if he makes sense in a deal for Trey Murphy. I don't know why the Pelicans would want him, but, to get a guy, you can't not be willing to include him. And it becomes more of a thought when you have those guys that have shown, hey, I can shoot the basketball. Hey, I can play alongside Cade Cunningham. Hey, I can help generate some additional scoring, some additional offense for us. I mean, I think Jenkins and Sasser have done that. And I think Chaz Lanier can provide some of that spot up, that movement shooting that the Pistons are getting from Duncan Robinson, plus whatever else they would acquire in a move that sends out Robinson.
I think just about any sane Pistons fan is taking that, you get back Michael Porter Jr. and Dante DiVincenzo, you send out 2 firsts, Tobias Harris, Jaden Ivey. let's say the Timberwolves won't do it unless it's Duncan Robinson instead of Jaden Ivey. Do you still say yes to that?
Yeah, because I'm getting Dante DiVincenzo and Michael
Bingo.
Porter.
Okay, that's all I needed to hear. I think to me it's still a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But I haven't
I
seen
like
it. I think that's a more attractive trade package to a team like Minnesota. Like without question.
Yeah, because they're still going to be able to compete. You know, they're not making a sell-off move. They're getting a guy that's going to play for them. Like he's going to play real minutes. Whereas maybe Jaden Ivey, if you're Minnesota and you have Anthony Edwards and then you have a couple other young guards and Rob Dillingham and Bones Highland and Terrence Shannon, like maybe there's not really a pathway to get Jaden Ivey a ton of developmental minutes that he might need. Like whereas Duncan Robinson, you know, he's a plug and play type guy. Yeah, I mean, I would get it from Minnesota's perspective for sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I think there's a core group of guys that the Pistons are like, hey, we could afford to move off them. There's another group of guys that are like, hey, we don't want to move off them. And it's really all of the Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, that group of guys. And then there's like we don't necessarily want to move off of Tobias Harris. We don't necessarily want to move off Duncan Robinson. But if they're the contract, if they're the piece that moves the needle for the deal to get done or to be financially possible, then we have to consider doing that.
I agree. Yeah, Aaron, is this a safe space for like a couple minutes? So we're like 45 minutes in. Can I just say something?
Sure.
I'm really trying not to, man. I'm getting worried about Jaden Ivey. I'm starting to get worried. And I know I said I wasn't going to make any sweeping judgments until at least mid-January, early February even. We're getting close to the trade deadline. Aaron, I'm getting worried. I'm getting a little worried because the reality is his numbers are the best of his career right now. He's never been more efficient. When you're looking at the efficiency stats, the per minute stats, Jaden Ivey scoring numbers per minute in line with what they've usually been. Down from like his first 2 years, but that makes sense. Rebounding numbers, the same. Shooting better from 3, shooting better from 2, shooting pretty good from the free throw line. He's playing easily the best defense of his career.
Easily.
And he's not making an impact. A night in, night out. Yes, he's had some decent games. He's had some okay ones. But can you really tell me that Jaden Ivey has had a single game this year that's as good as one of Dennis Jenkins' best 5 games?
It's tough because
even more so, has he had a game that was as good as Marcus Sasser's against the Los Angeles Lakers?
I really want to give Jaden Ivey the benefit of the doubt, and I really want to give him an opportunity to get his wings under him. But it's been 22 games now. It's not 5, it's not 10. We're 22 games into the season, and it's a lot of up and down. He was good against the Knicks. He was good against the Lakers. He had an opportunity to start against the Bulls and played 20 minutes and did not close the game.
No, because Dennis Jenkins was obviously the better choice. Right. And Dennis Jenkins shot 1 of 8 from the floor.
And it's, kind of, we talked about it in the Duncan Robinson stuff where it's like, hey, it's possible to move Duncan Robinson because you have Marcus Sasser, because you have Dennis Jenkins, who are clearly giving you these high level minutes where they're NBA players. And it's kind of that same piece comes to this Jaden Ivey discussion, because it's like, you'd love to give Jaden Ivey this opportunity to grow and develop, because he does still have a good skill set and an ability to help you. But when you have Dennis Jenkins having the performances that he's having, and you have Marcus Sasser coming back, and anytime he gets in, he's knocking down shots, like, it makes it harder, because it's like, hey, I need to give them minutes. And when it comes down to the playoffs, like, I'm playing my best guys, it becomes less about developing, and it becomes less about letting guys get comfortable. Like, I've got to play the best 8, 9, 10 that are going to help us win that game, that are going to help us win that series. So,
and Aaron, his shot, I mean, his creation for others has fallen. I mean, he's a shooting guard right now, like a straight up shooting guard. And I've seen people be like, well, yeah, but you need him to play off ball. He's better off ball. I don't disagree with that. But he has to still be able to create when he is on the ball. And he's not doing that. He's not collapsing defenses. He's not being able to, when the offense is breaking down at the end of a possession, take the ball and say, hey, don't worry, I got this. Here's my move. I'm getting to the paint. I'm finishing at the rim. It's not happening right now. Yeah. And the reality is, if Jaden Ivey isn't able to give you those things, that's why you drafted him 5th. Mm-hmm. You didn't draft him 5th to be an off-ball shooter. Great, he's shooting 40% from 3. That's not why you drafted him. You drafted him with the hope that he would add that to his game. But unfortunately right now, the reasons you drafted him, those aspects of his game, they have regressed severely. And I don't know if it's the role he's being given. I don't know if it's the minutes restriction. I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's the way they're playing, what they want, what they're asking. I don't know, Aaron. I'm willing to say that. And I'm also willing to say I'm just nervous. I'm not saying get this guy off my team. But damn, I am nervous. Because if he can't, the whole point about putting him aside Cade is that you take some of the pressure off of Cade. And he's not doing that. Yeah, he's just not. And that's why Dennis Jenkins played that game. Because and that's the part that I get scared about is, okay, the other games you can write it off. You go, this is Cade's offense, but the opportunity was there against Chicago and he did nothing with it. And that to me is great. He's scoring a little bit off ball. He made some good cuts. He played good defense. I'm happy. But if he's not doing the 1A stuff, there's better options on this roster, if we're just being honest. If I need a guy who's not going to create for others, can't finish at the rim, and is best used as an off-ball shooter, I might as well just use Marcus Sasser.
A 6'3" shooting guard with minimal shot creation skills and ball handling ability is quickly becoming a dime a dozen in the NBA. Those guys are signing cheaper and cheaper contracts. There's more and more of them available at any given moment in time. So if Jaden Ivey does not have the offensive initiating abilities, if he can't get downhill, break down defenses, put pressure on the rim, if he can't do those things and he is a 38% standstill three-point shooter and not much else than that, he's going to sign for very little money in the offseason, and he's probably not going to be a Detroit Piston. That being said, there is a plenty of time for Detroit before they have to make any sort of decision on him. They have until the trade deadline, and then if they decide to hold on to him, they have the offseason. And you would hate to have to let him go for nothing in restricted free agency, but if this is the player that he is, it's a tough pill, but you swallow it and you move on. That being said, they've got another month to figure this out. They've got another month to give him a chance, and they are trying to give him opportunities to break out and to get comfortable and to get more aggressive. Like, that is one thing that I think JB Bickerstaff's done a really good job of. He's trying to balance, hey, this guy hasn't played basketball in a year, but I also want to know if he can be a guy, because we thought he could be a guy. And so he's trying to balance not putting too much on him, but also giving him that leash to go out. And I think he's done a good job of providing that opportunity. And Jaden Ivey hasn't taken it by the reins. And so if you're a Detroit Pistons team that's like, hey, Tobias has been in and out of the lineup this year, we really do need to get another 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guy that can space the floor, defend fours, knock down threes. And you got to give up something in the deal. And there's a team that wants their hands on Jaden Ivey, and you have to do it. You have Dennis Jenkins. You have Mark, I've said it 4 times already in this podcast, but you have other guys that can step into the role that Jaden Ivey's played so far this year and probably do it a little bit better and do a little bit more than what he's shown he can do this year, which is unfortunate because last year you saw a much more complete player, but it just hasn't panned out yet this year for him.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, that being said, that player last year also had warts as well. And like that's again, I'm not throwing the towel in on Jaden Ivey. Like you said, Aaron, 22 games back. He missed a year of basketball. I am still preaching caution. I'm also though just realizing like they are running out of time for the evaluation. They are running out of time to see if he can be a part of their playoff run because look, this team's expectations are not just like let's win a playoff series. Now, it's we're shooting for the championship. Period. Like everybody in that locker room is saying it. So you need to figure out if he can be a part of that. And unfortunately, that just moves the evaluation process up quicker. It's not necessarily fair, but that is the reality of the NBA. Things change so quick. I guess for me, the thing is like it's the lack of consistency. It's the lack of like real flashes. And I don't just mean like a play or two. I mean like a 5-minute stretch where it's like, oh, it's Jaden Ivey time. Yeah. I haven't seen a 5-minute stretch where it was Jaden Ivey time. I've seen good plays. I've seen solid games, but I haven't seen what I saw his first few years in the league. And that definitely worries me. Especially when you look at, I think of somebody with a very similar profile in Dennis Smith Jr. And you saw how quickly after, a couple lower body injuries, Dennis Smith Jr. went from a lottery pick, the building block that the Mavericks are trying to build around, to out of the team a year later, that fast. So yeah, I want to believe. I just need to see a little bit more. So that's the end of it. Earmuffs off for any Ivy slappies out there. You can listen now. I promise I wasn't being mean. I'm just trying to be realistic about it. So anyway.
Well, Jasper, the Pistons 28-9, still the top seed in the Eastern Conference, off until Saturday. So a good chance for Cade Cunningham to rest up. Hopefully you see him back in the fold for Detroit. And maybe we'll get an update on Jalen Duren, who was is coming up on that 1 week threshold for his injury. So the Pistons could be getting some reinforcements as they get the Clippers in their next game on Saturday. But overall, can I just say something? It felt good to be back this week. It felt good to be back talking about the Pistons. I wanted to do something last week. It didn't work out. That's okay. It felt good to be back talking because I've been talking about the Pistons with people, over text, on the phone, whatever. But nothing like hopping on a podcast. We're going to throw this up online. We're going to have some people that say we're morons. We're going to have some people that say we don't know what we're talking about. But then there'll be the great people, the people like, hey, we appreciate the show. We love the show. We agree with your analysis, this and that, whatever. So it just felt great to be back. And I'm excited to get this one out in the world and allow people to hear what we have to say.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. I was so looking forward to this podcast. I was like, watching the Knicks game, I was just like, I can't wait to talk about this with Aaron. And unfortunately, Mike is on sabbatical this weekend, but we're going to have him back hopefully next week. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, brother. It is great to be able to hop on here. And speaking of our commenters, shout out to the guy last week who said we got like the best intro in the game. We wondered who produced it. That's yours truly, my friend. I hope you're listening to this one. I've made both the beats for both of the last two intros we've had, and I do the editing for the sound clips too. So hey, if you like it, I got way more stuff on my SoundCloud. You can follow me there at 15 Money. That's a little cross-linking right now. That's how you make the real money, Aaron. Yep.
Jasper is sending some money to my bank account.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, so we really do appreciate everybody who listens, and man, we love doing this. We're going to keep doing it. And I hope if you are somebody that's been listening for a long time, because we've been doing this for a long time, you know how much we appreciate you. And also I hope that you see that we are never going to change the way that we approach this team and our analysis for anything other than the best intentions, which is what we have for this team, because we love this Detroit Pistons squad. God knows we wouldn't be here if we didn't, because we watched all of it, man. We sat through all of it.
So
Yep. And we'll be here with you. 28 game losing streak or 28-9. We're going to give you the same stuff every week, man. So
wow, boom. That feels like a marketing line right there. That needs to go in like our pitch deck. But we appreciate everyone tuning in. So glad to be back this week. Make sure you're following the show, you're subscribed, you leave a like, you leave a rating, you leave a comment, all of that good stuff. It helps us continue to grow and do great things. So we appreciate all of your support as always. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe and our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast.